Every family gathering was like stepping into a wrestling ring where the prize was a clear display of favoritism, and I was always the one left grappling on the ground. My stomach twisted in knots as I walked into the house, the aroma of my mother's famous lasagna filling the air, rich with spices and nostalgia. "Everyone's here," my mother greeted us, her voice bubbly and bright, like she was announcing the arrival of a long-awaited champion. The front parlor was bursting with vibrant colors. My sister, in her carefully chosen floral dress, my brother, in a crisp button-up that my parents had obviously picked out. "Another award. Can you believe it?" My mother's voice rang out, piercing right through the warm embrace of familial love I used to crave. I felt a lump rising in my throat as I stepped further into the living room, my heart racing as I prepared to witness the annual ceremony my brother always received. There he sat, golden and flawless, beneath the spotlight of our parents' attention, the achievements plastered on his face as if he was some kind of demigod. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms defensively, feeling the familiar sting of my sister's approving smile as she settled beside him. "Tell us about it," my father demanded, his deep voice booming, filled with pride. He propped himself up, as if my brother's accomplishments had suddenly granted him an honorary seat on the pedestal he had built in his mind. I could barely concentrate on the murmurs of my grandmother and grandfather, contrasting against the happiness radiating from that corner of the room. Each word my mother spoke only served to pound another nail into an emotional coffin that had been constructing itself for years. "Mom, I won the science fair. It was no big deal," my brother said, brushing off the accolades as if they were lint. My stomach sank. No big deal. It felt like the understatement of the century. My brother, with endless resources, supportive friends, and the spotlight always diverted toward him, somehow managed to flip the entire affair on its head. "Another trophy." My sister nudged him playfully, raising her eyebrows in feigned disbelief. As my mother recounted each achievement with a flourish, I could feel the walls around my heart growing higher. It was swathed in disappointment, sadness, and a cocktail of envy that left a bitter taste in my mouth. "You should have seen it. He beat out students from all grades," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with delight. I could have sworn she lit up like a Christmas tree every time she put my brother in the spotlight, leaving my accomplishments dim and, quite frankly, forgotten. Everything I had worked for felt eclipsed. "I am so proud of you, sweetheart." My mother clapped her hands as my brother chuckled modestly, relishing the attention. I couldn't remember the last time I had heard a single word of praise directed at me, and it hurt just to breathe around them. A wave of heat rolled through me. "How about you? Any good news?" my mother asked me, her eyes flitting over before returning to my brother, as if she was just trying to fill the silence. My heart raced, not out of excitement, but fear. I was often the lesser child, the one who failed to live up to the dizzying heights my brother soared. My voice wavered, feeling like I had just entered a gladiator arena. But what could I say? The friendships I blossomed, the college papers I crushed, the relationships I nurtured, none of those paled in comparison to the triumphs of my brother. It has been standard. My voice came out small, almost drowned by the laughter surrounding me. My brother beamed as though my acceptance of inferiority fed his success. Oh, come on. Surely you must have something amazing to share, my father pressed, sipping from his wine glass with an encouraging nod, though his gaze was already drifting back to my brother. I went pale, and the laughter that was once filling the room faded away. I clutched my arms tighter, feeling the need to hide in the shadows, the safe space outside the spotlight that always felt so inviting. I swallowed hard. I decided to. I hesitated. Would they even listen? I'm putting my inheritance into my own savings. I silently reminded myself to keep my chin up, to appear unaffected by the tidal wave of disappointment in my chest. I had worked hard all my life, juggling 2 jobs while managing school, and now they wanted to strip away the fruit of my labor. Would they even care if I told them about that? I am planning for the future, I added with a false sense of confidence. Yet I was painfully aware of their expectations, already anticipating the contempt that would soon follow once the words rolled off my tongue. Really? My father narrowed his eyes as he leaned forward, shifting the emphasis back onto him. So you are just going to keep all that money to yourself? The accusation made me freeze. My brother turned to look, assessing me as if I were some new species, flawed and bewildered. That is selfish. You know that, right? The shift in his tone stabbed at my gut. Why was wanting to secure my own future seen as a crime? Selfish, I echoed, my voice shaking as the emotions boiled over. I worked hard for that money. It is mine. Those words ignited a flame within me, an often hidden frustration resurfacing. I felt my chest tighten as my mother's face went pale. We all knew how she loved to preserve harmony, and here I was tearing at the seams. I can't just give it to the family fund. I fought to keep the tremor out of my voice, clenching my fists as I willed the familiar tears not to fall. We all contribute to the family, my mother cut in sharply, her tone demanding. This isn't just about you or your future. It is a part of our legacy. I felt helpless, the walls of their belief confining me even tighter. My voice cracked. Legacy. It is just a nice way to say you want my money to fund the properties you want to buy. I gestured toward the extravagant houses we had driven past on our way here, my voice gaining confidence as the warmth replaced the chill of submission. The smirks on my siblings' faces turned into expressions of shock, eyes wide in disbelief. I had never spoken out like this during gatherings. And what is that supposed to mean? My father retorted, standing up from the table, his fists clenched tightly as he stepped toward me. The tension rose, pulsing like a live wire. I could feel everyone's breaths, silent and heavy, waiting for the storm to unfold. My grandmother had gone quiet, and the clink of glasses and forks on plates faded into the background. My insides churned, battling with the overwhelming need for familial acceptance against the increasingly bitter taste of betrayal that clouded my every thought. Dad, I took a deep breath, my heart racing as I looked right into his fierce gaze. I just don't understand why you need everything I worked for. It doesn't feel fair to ask this of me. The last word fell from my lips like a stone, hitting the floor with a harsh thud. There is no fairness in family, and you are being neither a good daughter nor a good sister. My father's voice thundered, and I felt every word echo against my very soul, slicing through my growing resolve. The dining table seemed to draw closer, the distance between us tightening, until I was suffocating under the weight of his words. I could see my brother watching, a smirk creeping onto his face, as if my downfall was amusement for him, while my sister rolled her eyes, clearly unimpressed by my audacity to stand up against our father. Maybe if one of your accomplishments actually meant something, my brother sneered, breaking the tension like a match igniting paper. You have always been in the shadows. I felt the heat of anger rise in my cheeks. How dare he? You don't even do anything. You just work. Enough. My mother's voice sliced through the tension, but I could see the cracks in her facade. This isn't the time or place for this conversation. I let out a shaky breath as her words hung in the air. We are a family, and families help each other. Except when helping means stripping me of every right I have, I shouted, anger boiling over in those moments. You chose him repeatedly over me. You demanded, you expected. When will I be enough? The salty warmth of tears brimmed the edges of my eyes as the truth spilled from me like a rush of water from a broken dam. I felt raw, exposed, standing unprotected in front of the very people I had longed to please, yet never seemed to satisfy. Don't make this more complicated than it is, my father barked, clenched fists quaking as the atmosphere thickened, holding tension like a taut wire ready to snap. You need to grow up and take your responsibilities seriously. It was then the world felt like it went still. Time hung heavy, and silence enveloped us, pressing against my skin as an accusation lingered in the air. I could see my sister glancing nervously between my father and me, the realization dawning that I had just stepped into territory that would change everything. I gathered every ounce of courage that I had left. What if I refuse? My voice dared to challenge the most sacred law of our family. It hung there like a crack of lightning in a storm. I could feel their shock. The stillness felt a little too heavy. I had crossed the threshold. And with that, a door slammed in the distance, breaking the weight of impending silence. All eyes turned toward the sound, hearts racing in anticipation for who was about to enter, or what was going to be revealed. I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration stirring within me, defiance coursing through my veins as thoughts of justice began to take root. I was tired of being pushed aside, tired of the unfairness that always seemed to favor my brother. From that moment, the stakes felt higher than ever. The path to whatever lay ahead was dark, but perhaps stepping into the shadows would finally grant me what I so desperately sought, a life of fairness. The dining room was suffocating, shadows creeping along the walls as the sun dipped below the horizon, the dim light casting a warm yet oppressive glow over the polished wooden table. The smell of rosemary roasted chicken wafted through the air, blending awkwardly with the tension that hung like a thick fog, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. My mother fidgeted with the embroidered napkin in her lap, her manicured fingers twisting it like a coiled spring ready to snap. Across from her, my father sat rigid, a hard line pressed down on his mouth that hinted at unspoken fury. It was a sight I had seen too often, yet tonight felt different, more charged, as if we were teetering on the cusp of something monumental. I served myself a small portion of chicken, trying to appear casual, but my hands trembled as I reached for the platter. My stomach churned with anxiety, the food suddenly unappetizing. My brother had already helped himself to a heaping plate, while my sister sat silently, absorbing every word that would slip from our parents' lips, my greatest cheerleader, but also a wild card I could not predict. Having barely settled into my seat, I caught the first hint of the volcanic bickering about to erupt. You should think about how you might use that inheritance for something useful instead of being so selfish. My father snapped, his voice sharp like freshly cut glass. I froze mid-bite, my fork hovering above my plate, and found myself staring at him, a sudden wave of disbelief washing over me. The inheritance had always been a point of contention, but hearing it spoken of so openly brought bile to the back of my throat. Selfish, I mumbled, my heart racing at the accusation. The very idea of being called selfish for wanting to keep my hard-earned money sent a jolt of humiliation through me. I had worked tirelessly to build my life, juggling multiple jobs while clawing my way up the ladder. I earned that money on my own. It's mine. Yours. My mother's voice dripped with condescension, rolling her R's like she was toying with me. You're not as successful as your brother. Just look at what he has accomplished. I clenched my teeth, fury sparking at the notion of being measured against my brother like some kind of commodity, a scorecard for family approval. Did they really think I would just bend to their demands? My mother's smile twisted, a facade over roiling contempt. They talked about me like I was a child, something lesser, and it made my insides twist uncomfortably. Why? Because he's made more money, I shot back, the heat rising in my chest. Success isn't just about dollar signs. I deserve this inheritance as much as he does. Not when you squander it away on useless hobbies and dreams, sweetie, my mother said, eyebrow arched, eyes narrowing dangerously. Her voice was patronizing, like she was speaking to a small child who couldn't comprehend complicated concepts like money and work ethic. Those useless hobbies gave me a reason to keep pushing when you both pushed me down. Or was that not enough for you? My voice cracked with rising frustration, each word heavy with an emotional weight. The memories of all those sleepless nights spent juggling my passions played back in my mind, punctuated by all their dismissive words when I needed their support the most. My childhood room had been filled with dreams, tools for art I had given up on, stifled beneath their expectations, and now they stood before me, eager to snatch away what I had built. My father's face turned crimson, the anger boiling over as he shot back. You think your precious dreams now make you entitled to anything. You've always been the dreamer, never willing to put in the long, hard hours. I felt my heart racing again. It thudded so loudly in my ears that I might have barely heard the clatter of silverware against plates as my brother and sister exchanged anxious glances. I kept my features steeled, but inside I was burning. How could they not see that hard work came in many forms? With every attack they tossed at me, every wave of disdain they sent my way. I felt a fire ignite within me. This was becoming a battle I refused to lose. Why don't you ask them about my failures? You've always favored him. I hurled the accusation, a quick strike aimed at the heart of the matter. My brother's achievements had cast a long shadow over my own. It was suffocating to live within its confines. They never considered the years I had spent building my passions amidst their criticisms of not being good enough. You're just bitter, my father spat, shaking his head as if he was ashamed of me. You talk about hard work, yet you refuse to see how much more you could have done, how entitled you've become. Look how your sister has flourished. I felt my face heat as I turned to my sister for support, but she looked away, uncomfortable in the direction this conversation had gone. Her silence struck me like a slap. We had been so close, yet now she seemed more inclined to side with our parents. I wanted to scream, to make her understand how deeply this hurt, but instead, I added another layer of emotional armor, suppressing the desperation bubbling within me. When my mother leaned forward, her eyes narrowed in my direction. Something shifted. You should face it, dear. You are just not worthy of this inheritance. It's not just about success. It's about how you carry yourself. You're not even trying to be responsible. The ridicule clung to her words, taunting me, punctuating my isolation. And suddenly, it felt like everyone in the room was an enemy. How dare you? I exploded, my voice rising higher, betraying my attempts to maintain control. I clenched my fists under the table until my nails dug into my skin, unwilling to let them see how deeply their words had wounded me. My worth is not measured by the standards you apply, and I refuse to be your puppet. At my outburst, the air thickened, and even the chicken in front of me seemed to lose its flavor. I could feel my brother's stare, my sister's awkward silence behind me, but my parents were too consumed by their greed to notice the shift around them. Their ambitions had only ever revolved around what they could extract from me, and I refused to let this be their moment any longer. It isn't about greed, my father corrected sharply, his voice cold and firm. It's about what you ought to do for this family, what sacrifices you must make. Sacrifices, I echoed incredulously, replaying all the years I had sacrificed my happiness to please them. The weight of their expectations loomed large over my decision to live my own life, to choose my own path. All I want is to keep what I have earned. I have sacrificed enough, but the moment hung unnaturally, silence creeping over the table as the realization that I might be facing disapproval settled coldly around us. I could see the choice on my parents' faces, how their expressions pooled into muted disbelief and anger mingled with disappointment. I was breaking the mold they had constructed, and as humiliated as I felt, a new resolve surged within me. I would not allow myself to be trapped in this cycle any longer. I was not a child to be manipulated. Then it came. My mother, in a fit of audacity, leaned back, a self-satisfied look playing at the corners of her lips. You might just be cut off entirely if this keeps up, she said. Her tone was casual, light as if it were just another dinner-time jest, but I felt the air crackle with unspoken threats. Cut off? From what? From your greed, I retorted, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill forth. This isn't about family. This is about you both trying to claim what I have worked so hard for. You're pathetic. My father slammed his fist on the table, rattling the glasses. You are crossing a line. You need to understand what family truly means. Maybe family means respecting one another instead of using each other as tools to get ahead. I exclaimed, my voice rising, shaking with a mix of anger and despair. I had reached a peak of frustration I had bottled for years. The room fell silent, a consuming shock hanging in the air. My breathing was erratic, and I felt my head swirl, caught between the weight of their words and my decision to stand firm. I looked at them, inhaling the tension, and for a moment I thought perhaps I had seen a flicker of realization in their eyes, that perhaps they understood how deeply they had hurt me. As I pushed away from the table abruptly, chaos erupted behind me. "Where are you going?" my mother shouted, her voice laced with panic, while my father's anger boiled over into frantic questions. "Somewhere away from you," I muttered, the words heavy on my tongue like poison. I turned and stormed out of the room, my heart pounding like a war drum against my ribcage. The last image I caught was their shocked faces, mouths agape, as if they were realizing they had just lost a battle on a battlefield they believed was firmly etched in their favor. I slammed the door behind me, the echo of the sound reverberating through the hallway, a sharp punctuation to the chaos I had just stepped away from. The conversation had left a churning storm within me, the words of betrayal fresh in my mind. I swore to myself then that I would not allow myself to be drawn back into their web of manipulation. A new determination settled in my gut, one that promised both conflict and revenge. And though I knew I had pushed my parents to the edge, I felt emboldened by the clarity of the ground I had chosen. As their voices faded behind closed doors, I turned the key in the lock, sealing off the conversation, the battle still unresolved, but far from over. What awaited on the other side of that door felt like the calm before a storm. But I would be prepared. This was just the beginning. I can still remember the day I made the decision to take control of my life. Sitting in the dimly lit corner of my apartment, surrounded by the scent of stale pizza and the hum of my laptop, I felt a mix of desperation and determination. The chaotic noise of words from my past echoed through my mind. Words from my parents, dismissive attitudes that reminded me time and again that I was not the favorite, not the one they believed in. As I stared at the screen, the numbers from my inheritance payment still fresh in my mind, $500,000, it felt like a seed of opportunity, a chance to finally prove them wrong. "Watch me grow," I whispered to myself, my heart racing with each pulse of resolve coursing through me. I began consulting a financial advisor, someone who had a reputation for turning failing stocks into successful ventures. The advisor's office smelled of fresh coffee and polished wood, the air thick with ambition. I sat across from him, wide-eyed and filled with ideas, a world of possibilities unfolding before me. "Let's start with your inheritance," he said, tapping a pen against his notepad. "It's a hefty amount, but with your guidance, we can make it multiply. I nodded, feeling an unfamiliar rush of confidence. I want to invest in stocks, but I also have this idea for a small business. I want to create something of my own, I replied, my voice steady, as I outlined my vision for an innovative online boutique, a space that reflected who I was. As the months rolled by, the stocks began to flourish, offering unexpected returns. I could hardly believe it when I saw the numbers climb, my investments morphing into something greater. Working late into the night, I could feel the anticipation building. I was transforming not just the money, but myself, from an overlooked daughter into an entrepreneur. I had just crossed the $1 million mark, and it was exhilarating. But the pulse of my ambition was mixed with anxiety. I was still hiding this success from my parents, still waiting for the perfect moment to reveal my secret. My heart raced again one evening when my family gathered for a casual dinner. It was my father's favorite day of the week, a time where we'd all come together for a meal that ranged from burnt lasagna to gourmet cakes, depending on my mother's mood. The atmosphere was charged with unspoken tensions as my brother laughed at some inside joke with my sister, while I quietly stirred my pasta, the steam rising like my pent-up frustrations. Lights swirled in the background, the unfamiliar sounds of laughter contrasting an unsettling feeling in my stomach. Don't you ever feel like you are missing out on something? My mother suddenly asked, her gaze darting to me, an unsettling mix of concern and condescension crossing her face. It just seems like you put all your eggs in one basket. Are you still trying to figure things out? I felt my composure falter. I have plans, Mother. I am doing something, and you will see, I shot back, enunciating each word carefully. The clattering of forks interrupted the tension for a moment, but I could feel the heat of their disdain. To them, I was still the daughter who didn't quite meet expectations, still the underdog who would never rise. My sister, who I had hoped would be supportive, rolled her eyes. What plans? You still can't even cook properly. Laughter erupted from my brother, and my heart sank. They were still bound by ignorance, unaware of the powerful forces I was now wielding. I went pale, hands shaking, but I swallowed my hurt. You know, there's so much more to life than just what you see here, I replied, my voice cracking slightly. A tense silence enveloped us, everyone momentarily caught off guard by my sudden assertiveness. Later that night, I retreated to my room, the door barely clicking shut before my breathing quickened. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, but now it felt more like a cage, trapping me with all the frustrations of my family dynamics. I flopped down onto my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of dinner like a disturbing movie. I felt the bitterness of my reality weigh down in my gut. Why did they refuse to see me? I had poured my heart and soul into this journey, yet the allure of their ignorance hung heavily over us. As I lay there, I remembered all the times I was mocked for my dreams and ambitions, all the moments when my parents chose my siblings over me. You are too reckless, they would say. You should stick to what you know. It hurt, and every slight felt like a brick that I had added to my wall of resolve, the wall I was now ready to break down. The next months passed in a whirlwind. I worked tirelessly, running my small boutique alongside my thriving stock investments. The feeling of empowerment was intoxicating. I loved watching my business come to life, the way my brand represented something I cherished. I invested in sustainable fashion, showcasing local artisans, each piece telling a story I wanted my family to hear. Yet, every evening, as I watched the sunset from my window, I felt a twinge of loneliness. I longed for my family's acknowledgement, a simple validation that they had chosen to see me. Soon after, I decided I wanted to stretch the fabric of my success, to turn the table on past patterns. It was finally time I revealed my accomplishments to my parents, a moment I had meticulously crafted in my mind. I invited them over under the guise of an ordinary dinner. My heart thundered in my chest as I set the table, the whimsical candlesticks lighting up like my untamed anticipation. I made a special meal, something I hoped would soften their hearts, succulent chicken with a garnish of fresh herbs, a tangy salad that tickled the senses, and for dessert, a homemade tart bursting with fresh berries. As my parents arrived, I caught the tail end of a disagreement between them over whether to bring the dessert they baked or let me handle everything. "She has no idea how to cook," I overheard my mother saying. "It'll be a disaster. We should bring something that we know she will like." I clenched my jaw, pushing down the flames of irritation, knowing tonight was not just about food. It was about power, the power I could rightfully claim. When they stepped through the door, I greeted them with a forced smile, trying to clear the air with warmth. "Welcome. I hope you are ready to be amazed," I announced, my excitement tinged with nerves. My mother looked around, her discerning eyes glossing over every detail with skepticism. "You sure you are okay handling all this on your own?" My father chuckled dismissively, nodding in agreement. "Remember last time? You nearly set the oven on fire." The laughter was too loud, mocking, yet I forced a smile, determined not to let it faze me. Dinner began, and as we dug into the meal, I could see them slowly relenting. The food was met with surprise. Maybe it was not a total failure after all. Encouraged, I took a breath and leaned into my moment. "So, there is something I want to share with you," I said, my heart racing. I glanced at their expectant faces, and for the first time in forever, I felt like I had a chance. I have invested my inheritance, and I have turned that $500,000 into over $1 million. The words hung in the air, a defiant challenge tossed amid the casually swirling utensils around the dinner table. The response was immediate. My father's fork froze midair, the laughter vanishing like fog in the sunlight. "You what?" my mother asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. My brother's expression morphed from curiosity to hostile skepticism. My sister's jaw dropped, as if she could not fathom this revelation. "You better not be lying," my father finally said cautiously, peering into my eyes, searching for a sign of deception. But I held my ground, no hint of wavering clouding my resolve. "I'm serious. I have a thriving online business now, and I run my investments like a professional. You can visit the website if you want proof." Their faces revealed a mix of anger and disbelief. This was not what we expected, my mother said, her tone edged with a warning. You put everything at risk. You don't know anything about business. I could feel heat rising in my cheeks as they verbally attacked my efforts. We just thought you would take a stable route. This isn't who you are supposed to be, my brother added, the words laced with condescension. I am becoming who I am meant to be. I shot back, my voice rising with the electricity soaring through my body. I can't stay stuck in the shadows while you all continue to belittle my dreams. I am taking control of my life, and it's about time you accepted it. Silence gripped the room, the place suffocated by the weight of my defiance and the chaos bubbling underneath. It felt like a ticking clock. Each second wound tighter and tighter until, with one breathless moment, it would all blow up. I urgently scanned their faces, seeking some glimpse of acceptance, of pride. Instead, the disbelief morphed into frustration, and the tension became palpable. You think this is a game? My father's voice hardened, his brows knitting together. No, it's a reality that I have shaped, while you all refuse to see beyond your narrow view of me. I returned sharply, my chest tightening with adrenaline and fear. The atmosphere simmered, boiling with unresolved conflicts. I could feel my heart pounding, aching for validation as the silence thickened. My palms were clammy, and my breath quickened. I felt like I was one wrong word away from losing everything. I was finally clawing my way out of obscurity, yet here they were, trying to push me back into the shadows. I deserved this inheritance. I worked for it. I am not just your underachieving daughter anymore. As I finished my statement, my father's expression shifted to a mix of anger and concern, while my mother seemed stunned, her lips pressed into a thin line. My brother stared, still processing in what felt like a total internal tug-of-war, as my sister let out an impatient sigh. You should have just discussed this instead of planning some grand reveal, she scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. It was a small jab, but it cut deep. I did this for us, to show you I am capable, I said, my voice wavering with the accumulated weight of their expectations. And now that I have, you see it as a threat. My breathing was shaky, but inside, I felt a flicker of something greater, iron-willed determination pushing me forward. Then I took in a deep breath, prepared to lay bare the truth of my success. Just then, the door crashed open, shattering the tense silence. An unexpected visitor, my best friend, stood there wide-eyed, bursting with excitement. Is this a bad time? She asked, breathless from running. I shot her a look that conveyed everything. I was in the middle of a serious confrontation, and her arrival was supposed to be a distraction. But in reality, the timing could not have been more ideally chaotic. Perfect timing, actually. You should hear everything that is going on, I snapped, half excited, half exasperated. My parents stared at my friend in confusion as she rushed into the room, pulling out a notebook filled with sketches. I have ideas for your new collection. We can do something themed around empowerment. I felt myself caught in a whirlwind, the tension left unresolved as my family exchanged glances of bewilderment. Did they see what I was creating now? Would my friend's enthusiasm stoke a fire in me I desperately needed? My heart raced at the thought of continuing this battle, feeling the spotlight shift again. I was still standing at the precipice of a new beginning, and the stakes had never felt this high. Right when I was about to finally make my stand, I thought, glancing at the silent specters of my family, confusion etched upon their faces. They underestimated me, and they were about to witness a turning of the tides. Game on. I took a deep breath, letting the anticipation swirl within me as I prepared to execute my carefully calculated plan. Today was the day everything would change, not just for me, but for my entire family. As I entered the dining room for the family meeting, my heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The scent of roasted chicken and herbs filled the air, clashing with the tension that hung over the table like a thick fog. My mother was already seated, her lips pressed into a thin line as she adjusted her glasses, while my father shuffled papers, ready to present his financial strategies with exaggerated pomp. My brother sat at the far end of the table, leaning back in his chair, his arms crossed defiantly. My sister, with her usual smugness, was scrolling through her phone, barely paying attention. "Thank you all for coming," my father began, his voice booming with authority, trying to regain control of the room. "Today, we'll be discussing our financial strategies moving forward. I want to remind everyone that we are still a family, and we will work together to achieve our goals." There was something about the way he spoke that sent a jolt of irritation through me. Goals for him had always meant his goals, never ours. I raised my hand, a gesture that felt both foreign and exhilarating. "Actually, I have something to say first. Can I go ahead?" The room fell silent, the clicking of my sister's phone ceasing abruptly as all eyes turned to me. Shock painted my mother's face, while my brother merely arched an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Of course," my father said, though his tone felt less inviting now. I pulled out an envelope from my bag, holding it tightly until I saw my father's eyes narrow in confusion. "I have been working on something of my own." I opened the envelope with a flourish, the sound of the paper ripping through the thick tension that fogged the air. "What are you talking about? What do you mean you've been working on something?" my mother asked, her voice laced with disbelief. With every ounce of confidence I could muster, I slid a series of documents across the table. "I have made considerable investments, totaling over $50,000 from my own endeavors. I have built something substantial, while you all were too busy undermining my efforts." The collective gasp from my family was almost musical. My sister dropped her phone, the screen lighting up the stunned expressions of disbelief. My brother's expression changed from intrigue to indignation, while my mother's mouth dropped open and my father froze for a second, as if I had punched him. "What do you mean? You've been lying to us," my brother shouted, an edge creeping into his voice. "I haven't lied. I have simply chosen not to share. You all made it painfully clear I was never meant to inherit anything after the way you treated me," I replied, my heart racing but my voice firm. "Treat this as a joke," my mother warned, her tone sharp as her eyes turned into slits. "This isn't funny. Where did you even get that money?" "Hard work," I stated, drawing strength from the moment. "I took on extra work started side projects, and saved every penny I earned. I built my own empire while all of you focused on belittling my ambitions, I said, my chest tightening at the memories of their dismissive remarks throughout my life. I can't believe this. My brother slammed his hands on the table. You expect us to celebrate your little scheme. You never showed any interest in anything outside of this house. The hot rush of anger surged through me. Because I was cut off before I could even try. I was always the one who was weighed down by your expectations, while you favored each other. I shot back, feeling empowered as the words poured out of me. My father's face reddened, the paper he held crumpling in his fist. I did not raise you to keep secrets from your family. This is unacceptable, he bellowed. Unacceptable, I scoffed, the sensation of liberation blossoming in my chest. You never supported me, Father. You only ever cared about my brother's future, always singing his praises while mocking my efforts. Do you remember when you laughed at my choice to attend community college? I was only 16, and you mocked me. I remember every word. The color drained from my mother's face as realization set in. But we were just trying to guide me. You meant push me into a corner so you could feel superior, I insisted, not backing down. My brother's expression twisted into something almost spiteful. So what? You think just because you have 50,000, that we're all supposed to just bow down and revere you? I leaned forward, feeling the energy in the room shift sharply. This isn't about the money. It's about the fact that I have broken free from your expectations and the chains of your dismissive behavior. You can't control me anymore, and that must sting. I cannot believe this is happening. You are just being difficult, my mother said, shaking her head as if trying to convince herself. This is just a phase. You will regret this, mark my words. Regret what? Finally standing up for myself, I asked incredulously, a manic energy surging through me. I refuse to let the toxicity of this family define who I am or what I can achieve. Making a huge mistake, my brother warned, his tone low and menacing. You may have money now, but we are still family. Do you really think you can cut ties and walk away unscathed? Your threats don't intimidate me anymore, I replied, my heart pounding, but strong in conviction. I will not share my success with those who have only ever manipulated and oppressed me. The tension crackled in the air, an electric silence settling over us like an oppressive blanket. My mother's hands were shaking in her lap, and my father's jaw was set tight, an ugly mix of anger and disbelief contorting his features. My brother watched me with narrowed eyes, as if calculating his next move. This is just the beginning, he muttered under his breath, and for a moment, fear twisted in my stomach. A cold chill slid down my spine, but I clung tightly to the realization that I had control now. I glanced around the table, taking in their shocked expressions my parents, whom I had once feared, and my sibling, who had always presumed superiority. No more. I had risen beyond the victim they had molded me into. You may think that just because I have money, I have lost sight of my family, I declared, my voice holding steady. Let me make it clear, I am done being a pawn in your games. If you want a battle, then let's go. But know this, I will fight, and I will win. The air in the room became thick with the taste of impending conflict. see my brother's eyes narrowing and my father's hands clenching into fists. The resentment simmered, but this time it was not directed at me. It was directed back at them. "Think this won't come back to bite you," my brother warned, the undertone of menace thick in his voice. "Or that we won't find a way to take what belongs to us," my father chimed in, a threat edging closer to the surface. With a final glance at the family I was no longer a part of, I added with finality, "Do what you must. But remember, I will not be backing down." The sound of my chair scraping against the wooden floor echoed as I stood. The stairs bore down on me, but instead of feeling small, I felt tall, empowered by my choices, and fueled by the anger and betrayal I had long endured behind me. My mother murmured something so low I couldn't catch it, but the look in her eye told me all I needed to know. I had shattered their illusion of control. As I stepped away from the table, a bittersweet satisfaction washed over me. I had changed the narrative, and now it was their turn to face the consequences of their own actions, and I was ready for the fallout. Just as I reached for the door, my brother's voice shattered the heavy silence once more. "You think you can walk away without a fight? Let's see how long your little empire holds when it's tested." And with that, I knew we were far from finished. The vindication I felt as I stood outside my parents' grand estate was indescribable. The marble columns towered above me like the weight of their expectations, pressing down relentlessly over the years. I took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp, salty air from the nearby ocean, contrasting sharply with the stale tension coiling around the home. My parents had built this life of luxury on the backs of their greed, their manipulation now a faint echo in my mind. I could finally see through the fog they had created, a fog thick with lies, favoritism, and blatant injustices that had once clouded my thoughts. As I walked up the steps to the enormous front door, lined with polished brass and gleaming under the glowing afternoon sun, I felt an unfamiliar sense of empowerment washing over me. I knocked firmly, my heart racing in anticipation of the confrontation ahead. Moments later, the door swung open with a creak, revealing my brother, his face twisted into a look of disbelief. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone loaded with surprise and lingering irritation. His eyes darted back and forth, as if he was gauging whether his words might set off an explosion. "I came to talk," I replied, my voice steady. I could feel my confidence growing with each word. "I thought you cut ties," he said, crossing his arms. I could see the tension in his posture, the way he leaned slightly back, reminding me of countless family dinners filled with uncomfortable silences and unspoken resentments. "I did, but I think it is time we addressed some things," I said, stepping into the cool interior of the house. The scent of freshly polished wood wafted through the air, a stark contrast to the emotions festering within. "You should really know what has been happening on my end." Before he could respond, I heard the familiar voice of my mother coming from the hallway. "What is going on in here?" She appeared, her features tight, her eyes narrowing as she focused on me. It was like she was staring at a ghost from the past, a specter of defiance she had tried to erase. "I am here to reclaim my narrative," I declared firmly, willing the strength from within to surface. She raised an eyebrow, disbelief etched on her face. Reclaim. You have actually come back to grovel for our love again. Her voice dripped with condescension, and I felt the familiar pang of resentment rise in my chest. No, I shot back, shaking my head. I have come to show you just how irrelevant your control has become. You thought cutting me off would bury me, but I have flourished without your backing. The air around us shifted, the once familiar room filled with an unyielding silence. My mother's expression froze, a flash of confusion crossing her features. It was like the moment was suspended in time. One of those typical intense family moments you see on social media, captured forever in the awkward memories of personal histories. My brother looked between us, clearly torn between support and fear of repercussions. You think your money makes you better than us? My mother scoffed, stepping closer, invading my personal space. The floral scent of her perfume, once comforting, now turned my stomach. Your little charity projects won't erase the fact that you were cut out of the inheritance. You never really mattered to us. My heart raced as I took in her words. Inherited wealth had always been the friction in our family. The way they lavished my brother with luxury goods, the glimmering cars, and expensive trips, while they dismissed me as a failure because I dared to forge my own path. You always favored him over me, and it was nothing more than a cruel game to watch me falter when all I needed was support, I said, the hurt spilling out into the open. Being dramatic, my brother chimed in, still standing on shaky ground, his voice wavering. You made your choices. No one forced you to leave. Choices. My voice cracked under the weight of my frustration. Oh, those are the choices I wanted to make. The choice to pursue my dreams, not hidden behind your chains of expectations and the weight of your favoritism. I gestured toward my brother, practically vibrating with anger. How can you live with yourself, knowing the truth, how they chose you over me every single time? What do you want from us? My mother demanded, her hands shaking now. You come here all high and mighty, thinking you have outsmarted us. But believe me, you are still our child, and that will never change. You need us. I don't need you, I said, the firmness in my tone belying the chaotic whirlwind of emotions inside. I have built my own life, an actual life, outside of your shadow. I took a deep breath, gathering myself for what I really wanted to say. And by the way, I sold the shares you forced me to walk away from. They were worth over $200,000, and it took me getting that money to finally free myself from your control. Their expressions changed. My mother went pale, and my brother's jaw dropped. You sold what? He exclaimed, panic creeping into his voice. That is right. Do you both understand what that means? My financial future is not dictated by you anymore. I have channeled those funds into charities that work directly with families who have been through similar emotional turmoil and loss. You know, the kind of work you never saw fit to support. Those charities are nothing but a way for you to seek validation, my mother snapped, though her gaze started to falter, the earlier confidence beginning to crumble under the weight of my words. So what? Maybe my choices may not fit into your narrow definition of success, but that isn't your call, is it? I ushered my passion forward. I am making a positive impact while you both sit here, entrenched in your greed and relentless criticism. You are naive to think this won't come back to haunt you, my brother muttered under his breath, though the tremor in his voice hinted at uncertainty. Naive, I echoed incredulously, laughing bitterly. Is that what you tell yourself when you hand out backhanded compliments and live in the mansion that I helped pay for with my absence? You too think I wanted to be cut out of the picture. All I wanted was my own space. I glanced over the opulent living room, the thick velvet curtains, the ornate furniture, the grand piano in the corner, untouched and gathering dust. My parents had grown comfortable in their fortresses, community and friendships losing their luster as they hoarded their wealth. My reality was drastically different now. A spacious but humble little house filled with laughter from friends who valued me for who I truly was, not for the wealth I lacked. Cut ties. You are asking for it, you know, my mother reminded me, crossing her arms defensively. And what have you found? The weight of your own mistakes. It seems to me the only ones cutting ties were you two, the moment you chose money over family, connections over emotion. You gave me no choice. Excuses, all excuses, my mother hissed back. You'll regret leaving us. No, I said, standing tall. I don't think I will. I might regret exhausting every ounce of love I had in me, but I do not regret finding myself. Her face grew dark, tightening in anger, her hands balling into fists. Meanwhile, my brother shuffled his weight back and forth, the tension palpable as we stood there. I was tired of them both. The games were over. Their need to keep me down would only ever work if I allowed it. Do you know what is vindicating? It's seeing you two face your own greed, I continued, my tone firm. Like watching a series of dominoes fall in slow motion. You will always be perceived as toxic people in this community, with me shining bright as a testament to overcoming it. It brings me happiness to know that my absence shines more light than my presence ever could. Footsteps echoed somewhere in the back of the enormous house, a reminder of those living outside of this tangle of tension. I realized I had so much more to lose in holding on to the pain. I wasn't going to shrink back into the shadows again. Think this is over? My mother asked, her voice low and threatening. You better believe it is, I retorted, a fire igniting within me, burning away any remaining semblance of doubt. I will rise again and again while you grapple with your decisions, wondering why I chose to move on. And just like that, the atmosphere shifted as I turned toward the grand entryway, ready to walk out. I felt liberated, revitalized. I had taken ownership of my life, no longer battling for scraps of their approval. As I opened the front door, the sun greeted me, bright and warm. In that moment, the outside world felt limitless. The door slammed behind me with a resounding finality, the sound echoing through the massive house. I stood on the porch, my heart racing, my determination solid. I was free, unshackled from a dysfunctional dynamic that had long suffocated me. Justice, in my mind, had never felt so sweet, yet in the depths of my triumph, a shadow lingered. I could sense the repercussions of this confrontation looming ahead, an unsettled tension that persisted within my family unit. I was ready for whatever came next, but part of me still questioned. What unseen plans would they hatch next to reclaim control over the narrative I had just seized?